Hi, friends. Do you feel disconnected from your imagination? Today, I'm going to give you some tips for reigniting your connection to your imagination. Amy Blair here from Creative Compass. We are an online community for creative explorers like you. And today we are talking about the imagination. So, if you want to be a creative, if you want to start making art, imagination is a really key ingredient. And I work with a lot of grown-ups who tell me that they don't have a very good imagination, or sometimes they tell me they don't have any imagination. No, that's ridiculous. Imagination is part of our humanness. If you are an alive human, then you have an imagination. So that's the good news. The bad news, however, is that you may be disconnected from your imagination, and this happens for all kinds of reasons. In our culture, as we get older, we often receive messages like, it's time to get real, right? That pretending and imagining is the realm of childhood, and that if you are an adult now, that you have outgrown it. So we stop playing in our imagination the way we do with children as children. We stop experimenting with things in our imagination, and that's okay for some people, but for us creatives, we really need to be connected to that part of ourselves. So take a minute and just remember the imagining that you did as a child. You probably created entire worlds inside your head, right? Think about, playing outside, playing pretend, taking objects and pretending they were other things, right? It's very natural. It's a very natural thing we do as humans. And yet somehow we unlearn it as we get older. And then when we're ready to really dive into our creative life, we get to relearn it. So today I have three tips for you to get you started back on this journey of reconnecting with your imagination. The first one is read fiction. I hear from so many adults, friends, and clients and community members that they don't read fiction anymore. They read, how-to books and personal growth books and nonfiction and a lot of news, and that's all fine, but it doesn't engage your imagination the way that fiction does. So, little fun fact about me, you might not know this. In addition to my creative work, I am also a reading teacher. So I know a thing or two about what goes on in our human brains when we read. And one important thing is that when we read, our brain makes pictures. It creates images based on the words that we are reading. Um, and that is our imagination. That is our imagination in action. So if you are watching, say if you're watching a movie or a show, it isn't the same. Great movies can inspire our imagination, but they don't ignite that process where we create images and pictures in our mind's eye because they provide the image. Right. So if you're already watching something, and so much of our modern world has become visual, and that's great in some ways, and it's convenient in a lot of ways, but it doesn't engage our imagination the same way that text does. So today I want to invite you to read some fiction, right? It can be realistic, it can be fantasy, whatever you are interested in. And just it's like literal exercise for your imagination when you read. And as we become adults, as we get conditioned more towards productivity, sometimes we adopt this idea that reading fiction isn't important or that it isn't productive or it isn't valuable the way that reading nonfiction is. We aren't learning, we aren't growing, but that is untrue. Reading fiction, like I said, is exercise for your imagination. It is exercise for your brain. Read some fiction. All right, so that's tip number one. Tip number two is play with a child. So I hope that you are lucky enough to have children in your life, either your children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, neighbor children, whatever children are in your life. Find some time to play with a child. You will remember the way that children play so naturally in their imagination without even trying, right? It comes so easily. And if you have learned over the course of your life that, playing and imagining is not for you now that you are grown up, you get to sort of unlearn that. And when we play with children, we give ourselves permission to be childlike again. So find some time to play with some children. I'm very fortunate. I have my own children, but I also have worked with children in schools and in preschools and daycares for a very long time. So I've really always had children in my life, and that has kept that thread of imaginative, creative play really alive for me. But if that is not your circumstances, I highly encourage you to do some playing. Find some children, do some playing. All right, that's tip number two. And my third tip for today might be the hardest one, we'll see, is allow yourself to be bored. Okay, what do I mean by that? I'll explain. So the imagination requires idle time. It requires time that your brain is not already engaged with another task. Sometimes this is called daydreaming. And maybe growing up, you were scolded for daydreaming, for letting your mind wander, right? And so we unlearn that that's okay. But if we're going to be creatives, if we're going to be artists, we need that idle time in our brain. And so here's why it's challenging. In our modern life, we have the ability to literally fill every moment of idle time. Now, that wasn't true until very recently, right? So if you're my age, if you grew up in the 80s or before then, your childhood, you didn't grow up with a smartphone in your hand. You had idle time. Maybe it was as simple as waiting in line at the grocery store or even, you know, in the car on a drive that you've done a million times and you don't really have to think about it, right? Your brain had this idle time. We can now fill every second of that idle time with input, right? With images, with words, with a podcast, with a YouTube video, with something where we are actively consuming content, right? Visual and auditory. And so we don't have those natural pockets of idle time anymore. We have to choose them, right? We have to choose to not grab our phone and scroll on social media or check our notifications or watch a video, listen to something, right? We have to choose silence instead. And I think we are becoming less and less comfortable with that as it becomes less and less the norm. So if you want your imagination to grow, to re-engage, to reignite like it was when you were a child, you have to intentionally choose idle time. And that might be counter everything you have been taught growing up. You might have been taught produce, 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 right? Be active. Don't daydream. Don't let your mind wander. So it might take some unlearning and it might take some practice, but that's okay. All right, folks. So to recap, my three tips today for reigniting your imagination are one, read some fiction, two, play with children, and three, allow yourself to be bored. I would love to hear from you if you have some other tips. I would love for you to drop them in the comments below, or if you've tried one of these tips, I would love for you to let me know if you found it helpful. All right, everybody, that's our video for today. I'll be back soon with more for you. If you enjoyed this video, I hope that you will subscribe to this channel. You can like it, you can hit the bell and get notified whenever new videos come out. All right, friends, have a creative day. Bye for now.